Welcome back to the Pursuit of Creativity. Today we have an amazing screenwriter. His name is Nic Curcio. He has worked for Sony. He's a content creator. He's written scripts all over the place. He is a fantastic guy, and I'm super excited to talk to him. Nic, welcome to the show.
Thanks, dude. I'm really happy to be here.
I've got so many questions for you. As I mentioned before we started, I personally am interested in screenwriting as another hobby of mine. But before we get into all the questions I have about that, I'd love to know, this is something I've done with everyone this season, what does creativity mean to you?
Creativity mean to me? It's a big question. I mean, there's obviously not one right answer to that. Creativity for me, I think ultimately it means just finding happiness in making something original, something that feels like you. I'm sure we'll get into it, but especially in my field, as long as you're happy, you have to really find that happiness in yourself, because otherwise you're just not going to have a good time.
I do want to jump into the writing. So what inspired you to become a screenwriter?
My whole life, I think I kind of knew I wanted to be some kind of writer. Growing up, I was always the kid who wrote, if the teacher wanted a 5-page essay, I wrote a 10-page essay. I just liked writing, and I was good at also just kind of making stuff up. I remember my mom always tells the story of I got in trouble when I was a kid and they took away my video game console, and I wrote a 30-page letter to her that was here's why you should give it back to me. And so she always talks about that in terms of me from a young age, just being able to kind of just write a bunch of yap and kind of make stuff up. But so it's always been easy for me to sort of put down words. I thought maybe I would be a novelist or something like that, or a journalist, which I kind of did a little bit in college. But yeah, no, sometime around 2012, 2013, I sort of had my first, it was a class in my English department, but it was kind of a crossover film class. And I wrote a couple pages of screenplay for the first time. I started reading screenplays. And then I think it wasn't until I went to film school much later, USC, where I was able to be surrounded by people who are screenwriters, and people would come into my classes and I would always try to ask them questions and stuff. But yeah, so it was kind of a gradual process for me, but it started with just, I knew that I liked writing stuff.
Yeah, no, that's huge. And a lot of the people I've interviewed, that little something that stuck out from their childhood that kind of follows them to their adulthood. It's so fun to see that through line for people. When you were in film school, were there any other aspects of movie making, if you will, that caught your eye, or were you kind of nope, writing is where it's at, and that's kind of where I want to be?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I went into film school really knowing nothing. I knew that I'd written some stuff, but the reason I wanted to go is because I didn't have a bunch of film friends. I know some people kind of, especially the generation who kind of grew up making YouTube movies and stuff like that. I didn't have a ton of people I could just call up and say, let's go make something. My friends just weren't really like that. I had a lot of music friends, but just not really any film friends. So I didn't have the community. And yes, I also didn't know much of anything. I had done a little bit of home, iMovie, just experimenting, but I went in as a writer-director. And so I thought, okay, this will be a chance for me to hone my writing, but I'm also going to be directing the stuff that I write, which will be interesting. So I ended up doing all that. I made a thesis film, but it always kept coming back to the writing. I knew that I looked at all the other thesis films that my classmates had made, and some of them were starting to get attention from managers and agents. And I just kind of knew that my directing was here, and my writing was here. I just always stood out as a writer. So by the end of it, I learned so much, and I did kind of have a secondary editing track. A lot, all my favorite professors ended up being my editing professors, and they kind of convinced me to do a lot of editing. And so I edited other people's thesis films. I edited an entire feature film, which was kind of this experimental, USC class that they had at the time. It was 10 different directors, and then just me as the editor. It was a lot, but I learned a ton. I forgot how to use Avid, but
yeah,
I did a lot of editing, which is kind of, editing and writing are very similar, because you're kind of, you're starting with this rough piece of the story, and you're kind of whittling and trimming and finding out how to be precise with what you're saying. So those two things are very connected. But yeah, eventually I do want to direct some stuff that I write, but I kind of knew coming out that it was writing was the specific thing, and I was lucky enough to be able to do that. And
being around people, I feel that's such an important thing for creativity. People that kind of get what you're trying to do and are excited about even little things that you're trying to figure out. So screenwriting is obviously a tough field. I feel anything in that whole realm is difficult. When you graduated and kind of started getting going, what was kind of the first couple things you could do? What was that process of getting into the game?
I kind of accepted the fact that I think a lot of people just have to do the assistant thing for a couple years. And out of all the skills I learned in film school, I think it was ultimately good that I became an assistant for a while, because I'm like a shy writer, and being an assistant, you kind of have to, there's a lot of like breaking out of your shell you have to do, whether it's the phone stuff, connecting your boss to like agents and industry people, or even just kind of you're in charge of someone's life now, and kind of all the things that you have to do to make sure that your boss is satisfied with like the work you're doing. So yeah, so I applied to assistant positions, but it was ultimately just there was like people that had come to USC, like guest speakers and stuff, and there were a couple of them that I just reached out to coming out of film school, just to kind of plant seeds, like not to ask for jobs, but just to say, hey, I'm coming out of USC now. I loved what you said when you came to our class, and just kind of my own connections that eventually the timing aligned, and people would say, hey, like jump back on that email thread, and like, I am starting a production company. Like, we need one assistant. Do you want to interview for it? So I did a couple assistant jobs. I was an assistant to a director who was a USC alumni, and then I was working as an assistant at a sort of horror genre production company. Yeah, I kind of just accepted that, okay, I'd be an assistant for a couple years, and then I would write, well, in what downtime you have. And I did get really lucky that all of my bosses I ever had, they knew I wanted to be a writer. And when I went into the position, they were like, look, you don't need to hide final draft from me. I know you're probably writing scripts. As long as you do your job, you can be doing that stuff, and I want to support you. Just like, don't mess up your job. That always comes first. So I was lucky that I had very supportive bosses like that. But yeah, I ultimately, I think another big thing was like, I got the manager pretty early after film school, because I had submitted a script to the Nickel competition while I was still in film school. So instead of the thesis film being my calling card, which I put all this time and money into, ended up being the script that I just wrote for free, that was part of no class, that I was just like, I should probably also submit something to Nickel, because I was nervous about graduating. So that script got me a manager pretty early after film school, because I placed, I think I was like quarterfinals or something. And if you place high at all in those competitions, usually managers will reach out and check out your script and stuff. So it was sort of like I had a manager while I was doing the assistant thing.
Yeah.
And then the first like big script that we sent out together, it was Blacklist. It got me my agents, and then I got the offer to go work at Sony like a few months later. So
Wow.
I was expecting, it was like, it's a very fast turnaround. It was just like the right moment at the right time, a very, very buzzy script. I had to do probably between probably 70 and 100 general meetings over the course of 6 months. And most of that time I was still an assistant. And so I was really overwhelmed. And I asked my boss at one point, like, how do my team is saying I have to take these meetings because everyone's reading the script. Like, what do I do?
Right.
And my boss was like, well, you can do like breakfast meetings in the morning, and it's okay if you're a couple of minutes late. You can go do your lunch meetings and try to come back to the office and, hurry up. And then I would do drink meetings after work. But yeah, for a while, it was like almost 3 meetings a day. It was super overwhelming. Part of that is also kind of like when you have the script that breaks in and everyone's like, who is this person?
Yeah.
We got to meet this person.
Like, get involved.
Yeah. So it was just, but yeah, I was an assistant for, I think like maybe a year exactly. And then I got lucky and went over to Sony.
Wow. Okay. So I've got many questions to follow up on that.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm kind of just like ranting.
No, this is perfect. I love this. This is exactly what I love to do in these conversations, just kind of go down these rabbit holes. But I did want to back up a second. You mentioned the Blacklist. For people who don't know what that is, could you just give a quick synopsis of what the Blacklist is?
I will. And I also want to distinguish. So the Blacklist is basically Franklin Leonard, who is the founder. Originally, he wanted to just create a list of like, what are the favorite scripts that were sent out in the industry every year. And so he compiled the script and it became the Blacklist. Nowadays, basically, it's a voting system. So when the year ends, somewhere around Thanksgiving, Franklin emails everybody in the industry, producers, managers, like all these types of people, not managers, because then they would vote for their own client scripts, producers and studio people. And he basically just says, what was the favorite stuff that you read this year? And if you get enough votes, you end up on the Blacklist. And it's kind of an informal thing. Like they usually have a party and it's very fun. And it is a fun celebration for a writer. But like just getting on that script is kind of like, not exactly a badge of honor, but it shows the industry that you had something that was a little bit buzzy and that people cared about. These scripts are not always the types of scripts that are meant to get made. Often they're just meant to get attention. because that's what you have to do as a new writer. So my script, for example, it was called Barron. It was about Barron Trump sabotaging the 2016 election. And it was kind of like a rewriting of history where you find out that by trying to sabotage his dad's election, he kind of accidentally caused him to win.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was the type of script that was like, okay, this is not going to get made.
Yeah.
But it was like in my style, it was in my voice, and it was kind of just a funny idea that people passed around like all through the industry. So that's what the Blacklist is. And then that company has been so successful that they now have an online component, which is a different thing, where anyone who has not broken in yet can basically pay, host their script on the website. You say what your script is about. You can pay for reviews. And if you get high enough rated reviews, then often managers, people are looking for scripts to sign new writers. So the Blacklist started as this industry list. It still exists as that. And then there is the online component that is now its own script service.
That is super fascinating. I mean, I didn't even know about the newer bit of kind of like the online side of it. I'd love to talk a little bit about kind of the nature of the industry and how, like, it sounds like there's a lot of like, if you kind of know someone that can help, you got to kind of make a little bit of a splash. You kind of have to put on not necessarily a show, but like you said, your script was like buzzy. And so could you just talk a little bit about how that, affects you as a writer, like over, I guess, many years, is like being inside that kind of like back and forth and trying to figure out how to get yourself out there and seen?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of things to unpack there. Part of this is why I started doing the TikTok thing in the first place, because I know that there aren't a lot of people who talk about, like, you can listen to interviews with writers and hear about how they broke in, but the reality is like it happens for everyone very differently. There's also a balance you have to find, right? Because, for example, the story that I just told, which was placing quarterfinals on Nickel, that was sort of the thing that opened the door for me. Now, that contest, I don't know what it costs these days. I think when I entered, it was maybe $35 to submit a script, which isn't too bad considering it's arguably like the best, most legit screenwriting competition. It's put on by the Academy, but it can get expensive because even the Blacklist website, like I described, maybe you put up a script on there and you're hoping someone discovers it, but it does cost money to host the script. It costs money to buy reviews. And so it kind of all goes into this problem of the industry, which is like, we don't want this to feel like a pay-to-play industry. And we also don't want it to feel like something where, well, I live in the middle of nowhere. I don't know anybody. What am I supposed to do? So one method that I do talk about on TikTok sometimes, and I kind of did this as well in conjunction with the heat that I had with the Nickel script. But if you go on IMDb and look up a lot of these managers, like look up the companies that represent the screenwriters that you really like or the people that write the movies that you like, usually you're not going to be able to find the email of like the senior person. But often brand new managers, someone who's promoted within the last like year, 2 years, 3 years, usually somewhere online, those people have their emails listed because it's pretty normal for new people to be like actively searching for writers.
Yeah.
And so if you send out those emails, if you're able to find those people's emails and send them emails, and you send a very brief email, you never attach your script because there's all this stuff. You usually have to like sign something before somebody reads your material. But if you just send a quick email saying, this is who I am, this is the general idea of my script, are you interested in reading? Usually you'll get some type of answer. Sometimes people will say, I'm not reading right now. Sometimes they'll say, I already have too many writers of that genre. And a lot of people will ghost you, but I had a whole spreadsheet of like all these different up and coming managers and people that I thought were reachable. And so in conjunction with people reaching out to me for Nickel, I just started sending, dozens and dozens of cold emails. And yeah, a lot of them never responded, but a lot of them do respond. So there are for sure ways. And I also think the good news is like now more than ever, the industry is so virtual in a post like Zoom world. Sometimes I go pitch in person, but most meetings, most pitches, most everything is online. So you're not even really interfacing that much with your representative or these people in person anyway. And so it's very easy in this moment to have that relationship if you live in another country, in another state. But yeah, get me back on track here. What was the original question?
No, you nailed it. I was asking about how the industry can be, you kind of have to not put on a show, but you kind of maybe have to know people. So I think you answered that question quite well. Like is a lot of that. It doesn't want to be pay to play.
Yes.
But there are some steps you can take to like put yourself out there a little bit more.
I always talk about how, the first step is just you have to have a really, really good script.
Mm-hmm.
And I do get a lot of people saying it doesn't matter if you have a good script because like you have to have like the connections. And it's like, well, you can create connections. Like even just in the time of me, I've been on TikTok for a long time, but I've been actively trying to post every day for a little less than a year, I think. And even just from doing that, like I've had probably close to 15 general meetings with producers of just people who I hadn't met previously, but are like, oh yeah, I watch your TikToks. I really like your TikToks, stuff like that. And so I think it's with the digital thing, it is easier to build those connections. And like, it never hurts just to like, if you find somebody's email, it's normal. People email me all the time. People email managers, agents every day, producers. Most people at least glance their emails. So if you be targeted and you be specific and you be professional in your email, and I think brevity, like nobody is going to read a giant block of text, but like if you just shoot somebody a very quick, brief email, I think you'd be surprised. Like most people will at least glance it.
Totally. And I want to zoom into some of the TikTok stuff that you mentioned. So some of the people I've interviewed on this show are basically using TikToks as a means to end to get themselves out there. So I'm curious for you, do you find it as a enjoyable creative act, or do you find it as like, this is just part of like my work now as a writer trying to get my stuff out into the world?
I enjoy it whenever I'm currently going viral. No, ironically, some of the more negative experiences I've had are when videos blow up and you didn't expect that to happen. And,
yep.
There's a lot of stuff that comes with that. Originally, the purpose of me doing it was, I think I just was I was spending too much time on Twitter. Screenwriting Twitter is what they still call it. There's a lot of advice from people who didn't necessarily break in the last 5 or 10 years. And I feel like it was just a lot of advice that's antiquated. A lot of advice that's like, well, that's not the way it works anymore. Like and so I think the people who are assistants now, the people who are breaking in now have a little bit of a better idea of like the new trends and the new norms. And so I kind of originally just wanted to get on and tell people my perspective on that. I also wanted to talk about the writer's strike because there was a lot of people on TikTok who were talking about it that weren't like on strike. And so that was a big part of it too. But in general, I do enjoy it. It's fun for me. Like the big thing is like, I have so many friends who want to start writing or who are writers, and we usually like go get coffee and they ask me a million questions about, do you outline? What's your process? All these questions. And so for TikTok, I'm like, I can put all this stuff down. It's not like I'm creating like a course, but it's like I can sort of immortalize my thoughts on those things. And yeah, so it is helpful for me, and I think it's helpful for other people. It's also, it's a weird space to be in because it's kind of like this quote unquote influencer thing, but I don't really think of myself as that. And although I do, like I'm going to South by Southwest because of TikTok. I get to go to influencer screenings because of TikTok, but it is kind of unique. And Tepper, who I'm starting the podcast with, we talk a lot about this because there's just not a lot of, in the film industry, there are not a lot of people who are kind of doing the crossover thing, who are like I'm a screenwriter. That is still my main job. That's still my priority. But at the same time, like sometimes, I'll talk about my own projects that I'm working on TikTok. I'll break down scripts that I've written. So it is kind of an interesting new space for me. But yeah, overall, like because my content is educational, so to speak, like most of the feedback I get is just very enthusiastic people, a lot of film students who love the videos, a lot of producers who were like, yeah, I always watch your stuff. I like your videos. So it's been really helpful. And then when the influencer stuff crosses over and I end up at the Enora premiere or after party or something, it's kind of amazing because it's like, I should have been here as a writer anyway, making connections. So it's like, it's kind of allowed me to slip into a place that I wouldn't be invited as a screenwriter, but I'm invited as the screenwriter who's from TikTok.
Yeah.
So it is, it's been very interesting.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. It sounds like it's opening doors, or maybe like a side door into a world that you're already a part of. I've kind of been calling them like creator professionals who like have a main job, but then they just talk about the main job on social media in a way that is from a perspective that they literally know what they're talking about. It's not like theory. And I find that kind of creator is like doing really well on the internet right now because people are just so interested in like getting into the nitty gritty. Like some of your videos I've watched, I'm kind of like, wow, you just went into it like all the way in. And I'm like, this is so great. Like you wouldn't get this from someone who's just kind of like interested in movies, which I find very helpful.
Yeah, creative professional. That's really interesting. I like that. No, I totally agree. And I love watching those things too. It is, there's pluses and minuses to it, right? Like I know that musicians often talk about their frustrations with like having to market themselves in that way. But I know that like I have so many book talk authors who come up on my feed that are like trying to build a fan base to plug their first book that's coming out a year from tomorrow, you know? So I think there's a way to do it that helps people and encourages people. And yeah, like you're right. Like there's so many people who have like film accounts, but maybe they don't necessarily have like the experience doing it. So I try to add in any way that I can. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really like it. I dig it. And I feel like there's more and more, and it's just becoming like a cool level of edutainment that I feel like everyone can get on,
That's good
on
too.
board with.
I like that.
I did want to get really specific for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of rules, and I want to ask more about screenwriting rules, but I have a specific question about a video you made. It was about a script called Bubble and Squeak from, I don't know how long ago that was. Tell us a little bit about like breaking screenwriting rules and maybe times you've done something like that, maybe it paid off, maybe it didn't pay off. Just kind of talk about the whole idea of breaking the rules in this world. 'Cause I think it applies to obviously screenwriting, but other creative acts as well.
Yes, absolutely. So one of my things that I'm known for on Screenwriting Talk is I do love to talk about scripts that break the rules of screenwriting. A lot of my viral videos have been showing the first page or the first couple pages of scripts that go against what your screenwriting professor would have you do. It goes against the things that I heard in film school from my professors about what you're allowed to do. And so the script Bubble and Squeak, it was a Blacklist script written by Evan Twohy. It is written in a very unconventional way. There's pictures in the script. The action lines are very short and choppy. The spacing is different. The page numbers are like colored. It's basically just an example of a very, like, if you're not familiar with reading a lot of scripts, or even if you are, you kind of just be like, whoa, like what format is he following here? It's kind of doing his own thing. And so I like showing scripts like that because it just shows that not everybody's brains work the same way. And you're actually like, a screenplay is not the final thing. It's just an idea of the movie. Here's what the movie is approximately, because it's going to keep changing and the director's going to come in and all that kind of stuff. So there really are no rules, in my opinion. Now, whenever I do make videos like that, people will say, well, maybe this isn't made yet because the script for Bubble and Squeak is written in such a weird way. And it was funny because someone did say that, and the movie just premiered at Sundance. It did get made.
Wow, I didn't know.
And I will
That's
say,
awesome.
Yeah. And it's apparently just as weird as the script is. I'm excited to see it. That being said, there's always comments from people who are like, this is ridiculous, or like, they often say that the script readers who read those scripts on behalf of the producers and the studios, this is what they say all the time, that they're going to throw away scripts that do those things. So it's like, here I am saying, this is so cool, it's so creative. And then you have people in the comments who don't even work in the industry who are like, no, like, you can't do this. Like, it'll immediately be thrown away. If you have a typo, it'll be thrown away. Like, stuff like that. And it's like, that stuff also makes me mad because when I was in film school, I interned at a bunch of studios and production companies. I would often get to read the hottest scripts of the day that were the ones that were selling by the end of the day. Like, and then I worked as a assistant at a production company, and then I would get to read even more scripts, like all the scripts that were getting sent out. So I've been the person who, on behalf of the studio, on behalf of the producers, who has to read those scripts because they get read by the lower people first. And then they say, you should read this, it's good. And when I had a stack of scripts to read, it was often boring because they're all the same. And so for me, in my opinion, when you have something that's like, wait, this one's different, to me, that stands out. And like, at the end of the day, all you're pitching your boss is like, the script is about blank. You're probably going to say it in 2 sentences, and either it's good or it's not good. If you were to say to your boss, there was like some weird formatting stuff, it was a little bit experimental, so I just stopped reading it, like, you'd be fired. Like, that, it's just not a thing that happens. And I think a lot of those people, as time has gone on, people have gotten very experimental with screenwriting, and a lot of the scripts, that's why I love reading the Blacklist scripts, is because those are often meant to be a little bit experimental and kind of unique and stand out. And so you get a lot of unique things that screenwriters do nowadays. And if you do it poorly, it can be seen as like a gimmick. If you do it really well, then it works. Like it is, I think you have to do whatever you have to do to be unique. There's a famous, it got made into a movie. There was a movie called The Babysitter, this Netflix horror comedy, and something crazy happens like 15 pages into the script. And if you go back and read the script from the original Blacklist, when that thing happens, you turn the page and the only thing that it says on an entire page in like size 100 font is WTF. And so that was like ages ago. And I think that was one of the first scripts I can remember where somebody was really being like kind of messing around with font and experimenting in that way. At the end of the day, it's like, yeah, like that stuff won't necessarily be in the movie. Ironically, they did put that big block of text in the movie because it was so memorable in the script, which is really funny. But to me, it's all about breaking the rules. Often people also say like, well, you have to become sort of a professional before you break the rules. I think it's good to know the rules and know why you're breaking them. I think at the end of the day, you're just trying, you're trying stuff, and you can experiment before you've made it, because there's nothing really, making it doesn't mean anything anyway. Like there was a Nosferatu, I did a script reading of that script, and that was another viral one that I had that people were losing their minds because the script is written beautifully. It's almost like he wrote a novella first before he wrote a script. So it's almost written like this very beautiful novel. And I had a lot of people saying, you could never write a script like this. Like if this was Egger's first script, it would be thrown in the garbage because he's not established yet. And it's like, you can this directors often have to like make a good movie before people take them seriously, but like a writer, it doesn't really matter if you've written a good script before or gotten a movie made, because the script is the thing. So it's like if you've never gotten a movie made and your very first script is absolutely amazing, people are going to pass it around. They're not going to say, well, he hasn't proven himself, because you have. Like the document is you proving yourself. So that is the good news about screenwriting, is the barrier to entry. Like all you need is one amazing script and you will break in. But usually it takes writing a ton of scripts before you're able to get to that point.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's super fascinating, all those things. And yeah, breaking the rules, love it. Great idea. Knowing the rules, of course, so you know how to break them seems very important. Okay.
Absolutely.
Another quick question. In your experience, how much influence does the screenwriter have after the script is sold? I feel like, because you've mentioned there's like the studio, the producers, the director, there's like a lot of other people with their like, a lot of other cooks in the kitchen. Like, is the screenwriter just done at that point, or do they actually get to continue and be a part of it?
So it can happen either way. I have friends who have sold spec screenplays that they owned and then they sold them to a studio. Sometimes if the director that gets brought in believes in that writer, like it's often their call. So maybe the director has their own screenwriter that's their right-hand person that they always bring in to work on the script. So it's like that person's going to take over and they'll probably be working throughout production and all that. Sometimes maybe you do form a good relationship with that director. Like I know Justin Kuritzkis, for when he wrote Challengers and then went on to do Queer with Luca, like they clearly just have a very close relationship. And so now they're very tight. And so he's not going to be somebody who just gets shut out from the process. Mm-hmm. But in general, the director is really the one who takes over. The director, the studio, the producers, like the screenwriter. It seems like there is much more of a rotating wheel of them that get employed. Like you kind of come in to do what you're meant to do at one point in time, and then you just never hear anything again. Mm-hmm. So for the studio scripts that I've done, I mean, in general, no one's like, hey, let's let the writer know what ended up happening, or let's let him read the new draft, like that kind of stuff. Yeah, nobody's filling me in. Like I sometimes ask my reps, hey, did anything ever happen with this movie? But for like I did this comic book for Paramount that was called Planet of the Nerds that was really fun, and I turned in the draft and I didn't hear anything for a year. And then a year later they hit me up and said, hey, we have a director now, come back and work with him to rewrite the script and do his notes. Sometimes you'll just randomly hear a year or two later like, oh, you're coming back in to do more work, and sometimes you just never really hear anything. Which is totally normal. Like most times you write something and get paid for it, it's not going to end up being a movie. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I've also been brought in to do a page one rewrite, basically starting over. And I never got to read the original draft. Like the original writer was definitely not told, hey, we're deleting your draft and someone else is coming in. Like It is, and part of that is because like the studio owns the material. So as long as they're
Right.
paying you, they own it. It's their thing. They're not going to be updating you and stuff like that. But yeah, to answer your question, sometimes the writer stays involved. More often than not, different writers come in. I mean, that's another thing that kind of drives me crazy on the internet is some big superhero movie comes out, or people will look up the IMDb credits of all these writers on these big budget movies, and they're like, I can't believe you wrote this horrible line of dialogue. And it's like often the person who got the credit might have not even written that stuff. Like
Yeah.
they wrote so much of the story that they're going to get the credit because that's how the WGA credits work. But like on some movies, especially troubled movies or movies that have had a million drafts written and nobody knows what the heck's going on anymore, like they're bringing in people on the day of who are like professional, kind of almost like ghostwriters. Like their name's not going to be on the movie, but they're rewriting it as they're shooting. So it's really hard to judge the screenplay of a movie unless you're reading that writer's specific draft of the movie, because more often than not, one professional screenwriter is kind of able to tell a cohesive story, at least from the scripts that I've read. But when you have tons of people coming in to do surgery on a script and rewrite this section, well, now that doesn't make any sense. Like there was a rumor that the Flash movie had, over its decades of being developed, that it had like over 100 writers who touch the script at one point. And so maybe 5 writers, 6, 7, 8 writers get credit in the end, but like everyone had written a version of that movie. And what you end up with is kind of often the Frankenstein version of all of those. So yeah, it depends.
Yeah, no, that's super fascinating. Which brings me to another thought I had. I saw one of your recent videos, similar to what you're just saying about taking notes and kind of adjusting and doing things. And you were kind of breaking down the difference in times when you should take people's notes versus when you should kind of stick to your creative guns. And I feel like in any creative act, anything like that, this can be a struggle. I know like in my job professionally, it's kind of like sometimes you're like, you know what, fine, I'll do it your way. That's fine, like whatever. But when you do your own stuff, you're like, I want it like this. So could you just talk through maybe the difference between when you should probably lean in and like do collaboratively stuff or versus sticking to your creative guns?
Yeah, so I was responding. Funnily enough, my fiance is the one who left the comment. So I made two
Nice.
videos back to back, and she wasn't trying to antagonize me. She brought up a good point. I had 2 videos back to back. One video was like, if you want to be successful, you got to do the notes. And then I made another video that was like, at the end of the day, you're the writer. You have to trust your instincts and do what you believe is right. And so, yes, the question becomes, which of those is the right path? And so I made a third sort of response video where I talked about how it's a really good question. And in fact, that's kind of what the whole battle of being a screenwriter is. So kind of what you said about just do the notes like you're getting paid, do the job. I think it does depend if you're getting paid, because if someone is employing you, then it is a job and you are there, especially a project that originated outside of you. So someone else owns the property, or it's some producer's passion project. He's had the rights to it for 5 years. Often, if you're being paid, then you are providing a service. Now, you don't want to turn in something that you think is bad or that you don't believe in, but there does come a point where you have to say, okay, this is a job. This job originated before me. It'll continue after me. I'm just here to do what they want me to do. And sometimes that's the situation. Other times you will have maybe like your passion project, and maybe you just really disagree with what somebody wants you to do to this thing. And so much of screenwriting is based on relationships. Like sometimes you will sort of handshake to work with people on the script, but you're not even getting paid. And so I think those are all worth taking into consideration, because your script is worth something. Like, it is original IP. You own it. If you wrote it, no one can go out and make it without you. So when you're in power like that, yeah, I think you really have to do what you believe in. But yeah, other than that, and look, there are situations where you might say, this person wants to option my movie. It's not a lot of money, and I don't know if I agree with them, but like I really need the money. And so sometimes that plays into it, like sometimes, like at the end of the day, if you are doing this full time, then yeah, money's a part of it. It's a job, like anything else. It's like people say, well, why would this actor do this movie? It ended up so bad. Well, it's because nobody knows a movie's going to be bad before they make it until they see the cut. And it's because it's their job. Like, it's harder than you think to get a job and sustain yourself. And often it's not like you have all the picks in the world of what you want to do next, unless you have the hottest thing in town at that current moment. So yeah, I think those are 2 situations. Sometimes you got to just say, okay, I'm going to do the notes. And then other times I think you have to say, this is too important for me to just do whatever you want me to do,
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agree. I hope that resonates with people because I feel like that's a struggle that I have sometimes. And I feel like there's a lot of people who probably relate to that.
Mm.
Okay, I've got a few more questions for you.
Yeah.
I feel like it'd be a huge miss not to bring our good friend or foe AI into the conversation. Do you think studios are shooting themselves in the foot by trying to get as much AI into stuff as possible nowadays?
Yeah, so another obviously huge sort of topic. The interesting thing to me about AI is like this conversation has moved and changed so fast. Like, and I think it just proves the technology is and the discussion and the discourse is like, yeah, like if you would have asked me this 6 months ago, a year ago, like it's changing so fast. The sobering moment for me was listening to an episode of Script Notes where they were going to talk, which is for any listeners, like pretty much the best podcast about screenwriting ever made. It's amazing. Talk about a free learning tool. Like they have hundreds of episodes. It's amazing. They had this, you know, they're veteran screenwriters. They always, they're standing up to the con artists of the industry and telling people how it is. And they did this AI episode, and I kind of expected them both to be like, yeah, like studios are like, people are going to get sued. Like the scripts are stolen in the algorithms now. And because it was proven that all those, there was like thousands of TV scripts already into the algorithm of the ChatGPT and stuff. And so I expected them to do this whole thing, but they were kind of just like, no, it's already too late. You can't go back now because, like I said, that stuff does move really fast and the scripts were already stolen. There are books, there are so many things that are already fed into this algorithm. And then, you know, that ChatGPT system, like we have DeepSeek, we have other versions now, like it's basically too late. So I think in the beginning, there was a lot of resistance. And I think, you know, like look at the brutalist controversy or like people will late night with the devil, like people clearly have a revulsion to it and they want to protest when they feel like that'll make a difference. But I don't know, man, like I think it is kind of too late to say this is not going to be a thing. Like I've heard that studios are already using it in a lot of different capacities. There are script coverage services now where they want you to upload your script and they'll give you notes on the script. Originally, I would make TikTok saying like, don't put your script in an algorithm because then your script's going to get stolen. But I have a feeling the studios are already doing that. I think that the direction that I've heard, I think it was on Script Notes actually, that they said that their studio friends are saying is we're being told you have to use the tools and do what you can to make your job easier so that you can work more efficiently. And I would bet that the studios have official technology where instead of having the assistant or someone go read the script, they can just put it into their AI and it tells them what the script is about. It'll give like number grade, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so part of me is like, maybe it is too late to be concerned about that. And maybe we do need to educate ourselves on how are people using the technology because it's still not fully being talked about with transparency. Like the studios aren't saying you have to go do this, but they're being told like, do what you can to make your job more efficient, wink, wink. So it's still kind of being danced around. But look, I also think that a lot of people still don't know the difference between like AI and CGI. Like whenever I talk about those things on TikTok, a lot of people get confused and they're like, they say Wicked didn't use AI, they used sets. So it's like, it's people who are confused about like practical sets versus CGI, but they think that CGI is AI. So there's still a lot of people who are a little confused about everything going on. I mean, and there's also like AI technology that has been a part of like Premiere editing for years. There's the sort of tool AI stuff, like the stuff they used on Dune, and there's that audio software that the Brutalist used. And so I think that there's another great movie podcast that I listen to, The Big Picture. And Sean, the host, said recently, like, he's like, I think it's noble for people to not want to watch stuff that was made using AI. But in 10 years from now, you will not be able to watch any movies if you take that stance. And we all love movies. That's why we're here. So it's tricky. I think, originally I was really hesitant about it. And I didn't want to fight against it. But I think it's just going to eventually infiltrate everything. People will use it as a work companion. I was talking to one of my friends recently who's a teacher, and he had gotten like an elementary school teacher, and he had gotten mad at some of his students for using ChatGPT, and then the parents got mad at him and said, I use this for my job. Don't tell my kid they can't use this. Like, this is a tool. And so it's like, it's such an interesting conversation and such, but it's like, yeah, I think give it another year and it'll be even more common. And So I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, the speed of it, I think, is the most
Yeah.
frightening bit because
Yeah.
I was at work. We were talking about something we did, a video that we posted a couple of years ago, and we were like, people, oh, didn't even Chat GPT wasn't even out when this came out, so we reposted it now, and they're like, the comments are so different because they're like, oh, this is AI, right? And we're like, wait, no, it's not. Like this was real. Like this was a thing. So it's just interesting how fast it can change, and it's only gonna like exponentially get more crazy and integrated into every little bit of our lives. Yeah, so I guess we'll see. I do hope that there will be like almost like a renaissance of people who are like, I want to only watch movies made like as old school as possible. I hope, and I hope that there's like stuff on social media and things like tags and all sorts of stuff that like kind of shine light on like human made or like whatever, which is like a crazy thing to say out loud that would be a thing. But I'm hoping that that's a thing that comes along with all this AI revolution things.
Yeah, you actually reminded me, just saw this on the internet. James Cameron, who is someone who historically is like, he loves embracing new technology. He's putting a block of text, I think it's going to be at the very front of the movie for Avatar 3, that says no generative AI was used in the making of this movie. Heretic, they also had that, but it was, I believe the Heretic was like buried in the credits. And I think this is going to be like up front in the movie. It's going to say that, which will be really interesting because that's going to be whenever it comes out later this year, next year.
Yeah.
That'll be a massive movie. And so I think you're right. I think there will be a point where we at least draw the line about like disclosing that.
Yeah, I hope so at least. I think it's just gonna be a wild ride for sure. So before we end, I want to ask you for two more things. So if you could give me 3 films written by humans that you would recommend someone to watch if they're really interested in like good writing. Obviously, we don't know exactly how many writers were involved, but like films that you're like, damn, that was a good, like I want to read the script like that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give you movies that would benefit by watching the movie and also reading the screenplay. So I think these movies are really good, and then the screenplays are like you can study these. So the first one is The Social Network. This is kind of like a lot of like, I remember reading it in my screenwriting class.
Aaron Sorkin, right?
Yeah, Aaron Sorkin. It's a very long screenplay, but it is so engaging, so compelling, and you see it helps you just to see what great dialogue looks like on the page. Also an amazing movie, like potentially my favorite Fincher movie. The next one I would say is A Quiet Place, because that is another like sort of famous script in terms of like screenwriters who nerd out about scripts. That script was, I want to say it was like 70 pages, extremely short. There are pictures in it. It's a very like minimalist script, but it's experimental. It is really interesting to read. And the movie is also great. And the original spec script is a little different. And then what is another good third movie? I'm going to go with, I'll go with Adaptation, just because I feel like as someone who's a screenwriter who often feels like he's losing his mind because writing is so hard. And if you're a writer who feels like that, then, and you haven't seen that movie, then you're going to just love it. Anything Charlie Kaufman. I mean, he's a great screenwriter and someone who has never really like refused to do his own thing. He's always kind of kept his voice throughout his stuff. Yeah.
Love that. Awesome. That is great. I know I got some homework to do. So before we wrap up, we love to end with 3 actionable tips, pieces of advice, words of, things to get people going. So if you have 3 things, could be short, could be long, whatever you feel like, for the people listening, hopefully they enjoyed this and will be following you on TikTok and Instagram and all the things. What would those be?
So my first thing would be, if you want to be a screenwriter, read a lot of scripts. I've always been like someone who is seeking out any scripts I can find. Like I used to be a part of the original tracking board, message boards and all that. And so being an assistant in a way was kind of like a dream job because I suddenly was just being given all the scripts that I wanted to read. But reading other people's work will just show you all the different ways that you can do something. And if you're reading a script that isn't great, it'll make you feel better. If you're reading a script that is really great, it'll hopefully inspire you and not make you feel bad. But I find that whether you're a novelist, a screenwriter, I love reading stuff while I'm working. The second thing I would say is, I mean, we kind of talked about it, but you do have to understand that there are no rules. I mean, I mean that in terms of screenwriting, but also just the film industry. Like, it's why it's very ironic whenever there is anyone trying to tell you telling you that this is the one way you have to do something, whether it's the way to break in or what you can do on the page. The industry, even aside from the technology stuff, like, it's changing so fast. The last 2 years in this industry have not been good. Lots of things are changing. So just understand that if anyone is telling you anything with certainty about this entire industry or about screenwriting, it's just not true, other than the one certainty, which is there are no certainties. And then the third thing I would say is just to finish your work. I think that a lot of people, it takes a lot of work to finish a document. Like a book is much more work, but a screenplay, when you get down to it, there's not very many words on a page. And you could write, many genre films are very short. A lot of horror scripts are in the sort of 90-ish page range. It's less than 100 pages. And, each page doesn't have that many words. So I think even if it's not good, especially if you're a new writer, you have to just try to get to the finish line. Even if you're like, this script makes no sense, I don't even know what's happening anymore. Like, finishing your work and putting it away, it'll give you such a confidence boost. It'll make you feel so much better. And sometimes the feeling only lasts like a day for me, but you have to have those days where you feel good about finishing something. And often I find I go back to my early scripts and I'm like, oh, this is terrible, but you kind of know how to make it better. And it's kind of just showing yourself that this is an ever changing thing where you're going to be learning, and your future self is going to be a little bit smarter. So it's good to memorialize like a finished script. Like, oh, I wrote this 10 years ago. You can sort of track your progress, and you can understand that it is a muscle. It's your brain learning how to do this craft better. So yeah, those would be my 3 things.
Fantastic things. And Nic, I just want to say thanks for joining. This has been a really awesome conversation. I know I'm going to go watch some movies, I think, or maybe read a script or two. But I just want to say thanks for joining the Pursuit of Creativity, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, dude. I love this podcast, so thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for yet another episode of The Pursuit of Creativity. If you enjoyed this conversation, if you got something from it, be sure to leave a like, a comment, a review, a rating, share it with a friend. Any interaction is incredibly helpful, and I would really appreciate it. For more updates, be sure to subscribe to my Substack newsletter. It's called Small Steps. You'll get a weekly dose of intentional conversation about bettering and improving ourselves and our community. All these things will be linked in the show notes, of course. So once again, my name is Ikey Ajavon. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here. And as usual, stay optimistic. Better days are coming.